Why did Rome keep changing its capital? For centuries, Rome was the center of one of the greatest empires the world had ever seen. From the shores of Britain to the deserts of North Africa, from Spain to the borders of Persia, the Roman Empire controlled an enormous territory connected by roads, armies, and trade. And at the heart of it all was one city, Rome, the city that gave its name to the empire, the city of emperors, senators, generals, and monuments. But something strange happened over time. The rulers of Rome slowly began to leave Rome behind. The imperial court moved from city to city, first to places closer to the frontiers, then to new political centers, and finally to a completely new capital built hundreds of kilometers away. The question is, why would the rulers of the Roman Empire abandon the city that represented their power? Was Rome becoming too weak to govern such a massive empire? Was moving the capital a sign of decline, or was it actually the smartest decision Roman emperors could make? The answer is more complicated than most people think, because Rome did not simply lose its importance. The empire itself was changing. And to understand why the capital moved, we have to understand one major problem. The Roman Empire became too large for one city to control in the early days of the Roman Empire. Rome was the perfect capital. The empire expanded around the Mediterranean Sea, which Romans called Mare Nostrum, our sea. The city had wealth, history, political influence, and symbolic power. An emperor ruling from Rome was ruling from the heart of the Roman world. But as the empire expanded, a new problem appeared. Rome was no longer just a city controlling nearby lands. It was controlling territories thousands of kilometers away. A message from the borders of the empire could take weeks or even months to reach Rome. A rebellion in Britain, a war against Persia, or an invasion along the Danube frontier could begin long before the emperor even heard about it. The emperor had a difficult choice. Stay in Rome and rule through reports and messengers, or travel closer to the problems and deal with them personally. More and more emperors chose the second option. Because in the Roman world, an emperor was not just a politician. He was also the supreme commander of the army, and the army was becoming the most important force keeping the empire alive. The emperor needed to be where the soldiers were, not where the old traditions were. During the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, the Roman Empire faced increasing pressure. Along the northern borders, Germanic tribes became a serious threat. In the east, the Roman Empire faced a powerful enemy, the Persian Empire. The distance between Rome and these battlefields was enormous. A Roman emperor sitting in the capital could not easily react to every crisis, so emperors began spending more time away from Rome. Some built temporary courts near military bases. Others chose important cities closer to dangerous borders. These cities offered something Rome could not speed. A ruler near the frontier could inspect troops, organize defenses, and respond quickly to attacks. The capital was no longer chosen only for tradition. It was chosen for survival. One of the clearest examples came during the reign of Emperor Diocletian. When Diocletian came to power in 284 AD, the empire was facing one of the worst periods in its history. The 3rd century had brought civil wars, economic problems, and repeated invasions. Diocletian believed that one emperor alone could no longer control such a massive empire. His solution would completely change how Rome was governed in 293 AD. Emperor Diocletian introduced a new system called the Tetrarchy. Instead of one emperor controlling the entire Roman world, the empire was divided between 4 rulers. 2 senior emperors called Augusti and 2 junior emperors called Caesars. The idea was simple. A huge empire needed more than one leader, and more importantly, it needed leaders who could react quickly. This political change also changed the idea of a capital. There was no longer just one city where all power existed. Different emperors created their own courts in different locations. Diocletian himself ruled mostly from Nicomedia, a wealthy city in modern-day Turkey. Another emperor ruled from Milan, which was closer to the western frontiers. Others used cities like Trier, which was strategically located near the Rhine frontier. Rome was still important. It was the ancient symbol of Roman civilization, but it was no longer the only place where decisions were made. The empire had become too large and too complicated to be controlled from one traditional capital. However, this system did not last forever. The Roman world would soon be transformed again by one man, a man who would create a new center of power that would survive for more than 1,000 years. His name was Constantine. In the early 4th century AD, Constantine became the dominant ruler of the Roman Empire. Unlike previous emperors, Constantine understood that the future of the empire was not necessarily in the old city of Rome. He looked east. The eastern part of the empire was richer, more urbanized, and more economically powerful. Cities in the eastern Mediterranean controlled important trade routes. The eastern borders were also extremely important because of the constant threat from Persia. Constantine needed a city that could serve as a military base, a political center, and a symbol of a new era. He found his answer in an ancient Greek city called Byzantium. The location was almost perfect. It stood between Europe and Asia. It controlled the passage between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. It was surrounded by natural defenses, making it easier to protect. And unlike Rome, it was close to the most important challenges facing the empire. In 330 AD, Constantine officially transformed Byzantium into a new imperial capital. He named it Constantinople, the city of Constantine. The emperor wanted more than just a practical military base. He wanted a second Rome. A city with impressive buildings, massive walls, forums, palaces, and churches. Constantinople was designed to represent the future of the Roman Empire. And that future would become very different from the past. Many people look at the movement of the Roman capital and see it as a sign that Rome was collapsing. But the reality is more complicated. Moving the capital was not simply an act of desperation. In many ways, it was a logical response to a changing world. Imagine trying to control a giant empire from a city thousands of kilometers away from its most dangerous borders. The problem was not that Rome was weak. The problem was that Rome had become too successful. It had conquered so much territory that its original system of government was no longer enough. The empire needed new solutions, new military centers, new administrative systems, new political strategies. The movement of the capital showed that Roman rulers understood their problems and tried to adapt. However, these changes also had unexpected consequences. When power moved away from Rome, the empire slowly developed two different identities. The western part remained connected to Latin culture and the old traditions of Rome. The eastern part became increasingly influenced by Greek culture and eventually developed into what historians call the Byzantine Empire in 395 AD. After the death of Emperor Theodosius I, the Roman Empire was permanently divided into eastern and western halves. The Eastern Empire was centered around Constantinople. The Western Empire continued to exist with cities like Rome, Milan, and Ravenna serving as important centers, but the two halves followed different paths. The Western Empire faced stronger military pressure, economic difficulties, and political instability. In 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor was removed from power. Many historians mark this event as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But in the East, Roman civilization continued. Constantinople remained the capital of an empire that called itself Roman for almost another 1,000 years. The city survived invasions, political crises, and wars. The empire had moved its center, but the Roman legacy continued. Conclusion: so why did Roman emperors keep moving the capital? Because the Roman Empire was constantly changing. At first, Rome was the perfect center of power. But as the empire expanded, the challenges moved farther away. The emperor needed to be closer to armies, borders, and trade routes. Cities like Milan, Nicomedia, and Constantinople became new centers because they matched the needs of a changing empire. The Romans did not abandon their capital because they stopped caring about Rome. They moved because ruling the world's largest empire required new ideas. The story of Rome's capitals is not just a story about cities. It is a story about adaptation. An empire survives only when it can change. And Rome's greatest strength was also its greatest challenge. It became too large to remain the same forever.